Well, our next speaker has sort of a checkered past. He's a lawyer. He's been a prosecutor. He's been the mayor. He's a politician, or a former politician, Idaho House of Representatives. And what I learned about him that I did not know is he actually has a Wikipedia page, which makes him from the start cooler than I am by a long shot. And from that, Leon Smith, born May 30, and I smudged the year out somehow, was a member of the Idaho House of Representatives, elected in 1998. Prior to this, he was the mayor of Twin Falls and a prosecutor for Twin Falls County. He has a bachelor's degree from Kansas State University and a law degree from Washburn University. He and his wife, Jan, are the parents of 3 children, and he's agreed to share with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Leon.
Well, thanks, Chris, and thank all of you for being here and supporting this effort by 6 of us. I still haven't figured out what the Brilliance means, but the bite part I got. It's been great to have all the humor in these speeches, and I'm glad that Sherry led the way with a little bit of seriousness, because mine is serious. Not a lot of humor in my little story that I'm going to tell about 2 years that were, can everybody hear me okay? Is that better? 2 years that were difficult for me. Not difficult like she had, but in searching yourself out, I guess is the best way to put it, and finding yourself. So in the 1960s, middle 60s, this country was in great turmoil. We had race riots, we had burnings, we had marches, we had all sorts of things, hatred and upheaval. And I was working at DuPont in Delaware at that time, and Wilmington is right next door to Philadelphia. It was fun for Phil, but Philadelphia wasn't fun for me then, because a lot of these things were taking place around Philadelphia and getting pretty close to home. So some of us in Delaware were getting a little bit nervous about it, and I had an opportunity to take a job down the deep south. That should have told me something, but apparently it eluded me. It was a job offer with a furniture manufacturing company, and they offered the job to me to be the general manager of the furniture company and also the general contractor on a plant expansion. And I was so excited about that, I took it in a heartbeat. The plant itself was a pretty antiquated little plant. They made furniture, beds, headboards, desks, dining room tables, chairs. Chairs were the big thing, all out of solid oak. And so it was a pretty good line of furniture. But the plant itself was really not in good shape. For instance, I said antiquated, they had a hose bib or a spigot over on one side of the plant. That is where the employees would go to get a drink of water. And one was for whites, and on the other side of the plant was for blacks. This plant had about 50 employees, sometimes 60, and it was really, really busy. And when you have a line of furniture going through and you've got to leave the line to go get a drink of water outside at the hose bib, that doesn't make a lot of sense, or it didn't to me anyway when I first arrived there. And they didn't have bathrooms, they had outhouses out on the creek. And their source of heat was the big boiler. The furniture company's got to have a boiler because you've got to kiln dry your lumber, and you need the steam to bend wood to fit in the slats of the chairs and things like this. But they had a good line of furniture, and the furniture was selling well. And for those of you that can date back to John F. Kennedy, you can remember he would sit on the White House porch and watch his family play flag football in a rocker. It was an oak rocker with woven seats and woven cane back. And that was one of Rex's chairs. So that's the kind of furniture they made, and it was fairly popular. Rex Furniture Plant was in a little tiny town called Rex, Georgia, south of Atlanta, down in the deep south. The employment in that plant was, like I said, about 50 employees, 50 to 60, and it was about 60% black. And we employed convicts. The penitentiary was pretty close, and so we did a work release program with convicts, and so we had a good mix of people in this plant. But it went well with my initial arrival there and starting out on the construction of this plant addition, which was doubling the plant size. And so it was a pretty big project to double the size of the plant. And I love construction. I grew up in it, so I loved that aspect more than managing the plant, but the whole thing was very interesting. We built a big room for shipping and storage and boxing, and part of it was for a new finish room. And then we had what we called a cafeteria, but it was really just a large room with tables so that they could eat there and not have to go to the boiler room, because winters are cold in Atlanta and in that part of Georgia. And you got about 3 months there that, you know, they're going to have a picnic outside. And so the blacks would sit on one side of the boiler and the whites would sit on the other side of the boiler for breaks and to eat their lunch. That was kind of the source of heat. Well, we got along through that summer and got the plant, the addition to the plant was going up, and by fall we had it closed in, and we were making some good progress with it. And I was learning a little bit about how to run a furniture company. And I was enjoying this whole experience, except for the adjustments to the segregation. This was a fully segregated plant, and everything was black or white. And you got to know that this was a difficult time in Georgia. We had a governor called Lester Maddox, and if any of you ever heard of Lester Maddox, I still have a vision of this TV news clip of him. He owned a chain of restaurants, and he appeared on TV with his baseball bat that he was always carrying, and he said, he's tapping his baseball bat in his hand, and he says, "No nigger is going to go to one of my restaurants because I'm going to be there to make sure they don't." And so this is what you're dealing with at the top of the ladder. And the barber shop was even worse. And my neighbors were even worse than that. So I'm trying to integrate a plant. I'm a small town boy from western Kansas, raised in a town about the size of Buell. We had a few more blacks than that. And there was segregation, but you don't know anything about it unless you're in the mix. And I had a good friend, Craig Jones, who I grew up with from kindergarten up through high school. And Craig was an all-state football player, running back, and won the state in the 100-yard dash. And so he got a scholarship to go to Kansas State University, and he and I both went to Kansas State University at the same time. So we kept in touch until he died about 3 years ago. But I knew that I couldn't take Craig to a restaurant and have a hamburger. But we could go to Dairy Queen and sit in the car and have a hamburger. And I found out that he couldn't go to the movie because the last of our senior year, we all went to the movie together. And the owner of the movie came down and moved Craig out. So I knew it was there, but I had no understanding of it until I got in the Deep South. That's where I really learned about it. That's not much of a background for dealing with what I was dealing with down there. I was a Westerner, though, so that helped. And I loved the people in that plant. They were really good people. Probably 10 to 20% of them couldn't read or write. But they were good people. They worked hard, and they were brutally honest with you. So, it was a good experience from that standpoint. And I had a superintendent, a plant superintendent, that was fantastic. He could deal with people. He could fix things. He was just a wonderful guy, and he was my consult on almost everything. Well, the transition is what I wanted to talk about. And we finally finished this edition, and so we've got this cafeteria, and we've got these restrooms. And early on, when I first got there, I said, we're not going to drink out of a hose bib. I'm buying a refrigerated water cooler, and I put it in the center of the plant so people could get back and forth there. Of course, the whites commandeered it immediately, and the blacks still were going out to the spigot. And so we made it known that everyone was going to drink from that. And somebody came up with the idea of paper cups. And believe it or not, it worked. Everybody was drinking out of the water fountain then with paper cups. And so I thought, well, this isn't going to be that hard. What did I learn? Because when we got the plant done and the weather started to turn cold, and the whites commandeered the lunchroom. And that wasn't going to work because the lunchroom was big enough and everybody was supposed to eat there. So, but it didn't matter what you said. These things had to kind of gel. And eventually, the blacks and the whites started dividing up the tables and designating tables and areas, and this was the way it was going to be. And so we got through that hurdle, but we still didn't have any blacks coming into the restrooms. The white ladies had commandeered the ladies' room. The black guys, or the white guys, had commandeered the white men's room. So how in the world do you get everybody in there to do that? And this one, when the weather turned cold, George, who was the handyman at the plant, and I went out, and we pushed down the outhouses into the creek. Well, the kudzu's going to cover them in a year anyway, so yeah, that's not a problem. But it did force them inside. And so the blacks came in. And I still don't know to this day exactly how they worked it out. But they marked the commodes and the lavatories and the stalls and the urinals, and they did it. You know, it's awfully hard for someone to tell somebody else where to go pee. And I couldn't do that, but I had help from the plant superintendent and old George. That they helped work the crowd, and we got through that part of it. And we made good progress after we got the plant in operation, the whole plant. We had a fire in the old finish room, which did some damage, but we got through that. And we were doing pretty well. And I'm real proud that things were running like they were. And then Martin Luther King got assassinated. And he had a church just a short distance from our plant. And so before they even had the funeral, I had two carloads of black guys come up and call me out on the dock. And they told me that I was going to close the plant down. And at this time, this is a half a century ago, so I can't remember it very good. But it was either 1 week or 2 weeks that we were going to be closed in observance of Martin Luther King's death. And I said, well, I'll have to think about that. And as they departed, the one guy that was their spokesman said, well, if you don't, we're going to burn your plant down. And so now it's getting kind of serious. And I went in and briefly talked with the superintendent about it to tell him what had happened. And I said, I'm going to go in and talk to the weaving room. The weaving room is where they did the weaving on the chairs. and where the cane was put in the back of the church, all the rush bottoms were put in the ladder back chairs. And these ladies' hands could fly. There were about 15 of them in there. And of course they were all black. And they worked on piecework. And they were delightful ladies. They always had a cheery thing to say. And my office was right through the wall to the weaving room. And they would periodically break into music. They would sing gospel music, and you just wanted to sit back and just listen, and I did. It was a wonderful thing to hear. And those ladies to me were kind of the heart of the plant. And so I said, I'm going to go back and talk to the ladies. And I went back there and I talked to them and I said, this is the threat that we've got. Now, do you want to be the plant to close for a week or 2 weeks? And of course, they wanted the money. They get paid by the piece. And so they 100% wanted to go ahead and work. They did not want to be shut down. And so that did it for me. We had a lot of rednecks in this plant. And when the white guys heard that the black guys were threatening to burn the plant down, they were ready to come out. And they came out with guns. And this is one of those times in your life. I had enough law background. I already had a law degree, and I was a member of the bar in Kansas. But I said, this could be a little war out here. And I know who's going to get hung. And so I sort of played dumb. I didn't tell them they couldn't do it. I didn't tell them they could do it. I just played like it wasn't happening. And those guys, for a week or two, they would take shifts and they would go out there and sit on the wood pile in the cold evenings and with nothing but a thermos of coffee and a gun. And I don't know whether that threat curtailed that or not. We didn't nobody ever came around, nobody ever tried to burn the plant down. So things went smoothly through that. And so that was my learning experience. And eventually I said, I'm not a deep south person. I'm going to go to the northwest. And so I left that job, and I left Georgia, and I headed to Idaho. In November of 1968, I moved here. Been here ever since, and I love it. And I love it all.